Originally live streamed via StreamYard on December 16, 2024. The award-winning support our #Creatives podcast, hosted by Alan Greenstein. Special guest is Danielle Earle, executive producer and director of the documentary series Mighty Voices, Trailblazers of LGBTQ Advocacy. This is a groundbreaking documentary series that offers an intimate, raw, and inspiring look into the lives and journeys of LGBTQ advocates from all walks of life. We will also discuss her company PL Entertainment and the various projects she has created. This is a recording of a live broadcast, so expect some imperfections during the show. There was some editing performed on the original recording. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello everybody. This is a part of our #Creatives, and so great to be here tonight. Our guest is filmmaker Danielle Earle. We'll be having her introduce herself in a few moments, but first, let me introduce myself. So I'm Alan Greenstein. I'm the founder of Support Our #Creatives, and what we want to do here is level the playing field for underrepresented creatives and artists so that they have the same opportunities as everyone else to get their works created, distributed, and seen. I'm also on the board of directors of the Bella Levy Foundation. The goal of the Bella Levy Foundation is to fight human trafficking and provide a safe haven for its warriors. So once again, tonight we welcome Danielle Earle, CEO and founder of PL Entertainment, LLC, and Danielle, please introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll start answering the questions.
Hi, Alan. I want to say thank you, Alan, for inviting me to be on. My name is Danielle Earle. I'm the CEO and founder of PL Entertainment, LLC. And we pretty much specialize in just video production projects like documentaries, feature films, music videos. We were established in 2010, so that kind of sums it up with that. But yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, why don't you tell us your origination story? I always like to have people begin that way because everybody has an interesting story how they got to where they are today. So let's how did you get started? What did you do? What made you want to become into entertainment?
Oh my God, Alan. So you kind of knew my origin story like way back, because when I was starting out as a filmmaker, I pretty much when I was growing up, I didn't, really think about filmmaking at all. Kind of happened late in life because I went to school for animation visual effects in San Francisco, Academy of Art University, and that was kind of like my main focus, just animation, illustration. Then I started taking like just film classes, through the Academy of Art University, and my professor was like, yeah, Danielle, you seems like, you know about, filmmaking and like films and all these like movies from like the 50s. Cause I kind of grew up in that whole environment with my mother, loving soap operas and, all that type of stuff. So he's like, yeah, you should look into that, maybe pursue it, so I ended up getting my BFA in animation. Then I went to City College in New York for my master's in documentary films. And that's kind of where I got my start in terms of filmmaking, just the ground roots and meeting other filmmakers in New York and falling in love with Brooklyn. And so that's kind of the origin story. And then later after Brooklyn is in Love, during Brooklyn is in Love, I established the company PL Entertainment around that time. And they kind of just discovered me from the Writers Guild of America East, discovered me online. And I actually got connected with you, in the very beginning stages of Brooklyn is in Love. And yeah, that's kind of how that whole story, started.
But people know I also went to City College of New York. Well, back in the late 60s and early 70s. So we have something common there. Absolutely. Yeah, right. Yeah. So let's see. So so Brooklyn. You mentioned Brooklyn is in Love. was that your first big project that you worked on?
Well, I would say the project that I worked on before that was On the Scene. It was,
Oh,
to
okay.
me, like, for others, it was like kind of a small project, but it was like, I literally had, I was young. I bought a $200 camcorder from Kmart. And I, in terms of music, that was kind of my whole thing. My father used to be a disc jockey, growing up. He was studying at, oh my gosh, for engineering. He went to school out there. And then he met my mother later on. He went to the Stevens Institute of Technology. And so he kind of just, but music was kind of his passion and whatnot. So yeah, I just, just falling in love with Brooklyn, that whole scene of, you're in your 20s and meeting all these different bands. And I was like, I'd love to kind of document their story and kind of, how they went into that field. And, because a lot of them were struggling, independent artists like me. And so a lot of people don't know, how much work they put into, what they do. And I just wanted to kind of celebrate them. So I started On the Scene. I started interviewing like artists like, Ian Axel. I did a little music video for them. Now they're called Great Big, what's it called? Great Big World. They worked with Christina Aguilera and all these different artists. And yeah, it was like Spring Standards, all these different like small, I'm not just to say small, but indie bands back then, they were kind of just undiscovered. And then all of a sudden they just blew up. And, yeah. And then all through that, that's when I started saying, oh, I'd love to develop a series, Brooklyn is in Love. I collaborated with Stephanie, who was my co-writer on that series. And we were like pen pals. It was before that, from On the Scene, I was studying at not City College in New York, Academy of Art University in San Francisco. And that's where I got connected with Stephanie on Tumblr. And so we got communicated there. She would write poems. And, this is way before, like, I don't know if Facebook started around that time, maybe when I graduated, around that, kind of started, a lot of people started using it, but I didn't really use that often. It was like MySpace was still going, out there, but Tumblr was kind of like the next wave before Facebook, and that's kind of how we got connected. And so yeah, that's the story in a nutshell.
Yeah. Did you ever actually live in Brooklyn?
Actually, no, I didn't. But my friend, all the actors and the people, like the artists, lived in Brooklyn. But I originally was from Bronx, New York. I grew up in the Bronx. My mom, family, and everyone. So I always used to go out to New York all the time. But I think it was just a different experience for me as like a 20-something-year-old, and kind of just discovering, just all these people that were like me in terms of artists and everything. So. Yeah, that was kind of the whole, experience with that. So yeah.
Well, once again, another connection. I was brought up in Brooklyn. So,
right.
Yeah, of course. Now, of course, it's a lot different now than it was when I was living there. I left in the 70s, but of course, by the time Brooklyn is in Love came along in the early 2000s, Brooklyn had changed, and with the gentrification and being a hip place to be and stuff like that. So you kind of captured that situation, as Brooklyn was really becoming that kind of a place to live. In Brooklyn is in Love. That's what I think.
Awesome. Oh, that's like, I don't know. Back then it was like a lot of people were kind of scared, for Brooklyn, because it was changing and everything like that. A lot of people didn't know, like, they're like, oh, going to Brooklyn, we're kind of scared. Now it's like a totally different scene. It's like the new kind of like Manhattan in a sense or whatever, like, Greenwich Village and everything else. And so, but yeah, that's an amazing story.
Yeah. So Brooklyn is the star of Brooklyn is in Love, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. As I say, I found out about you through Okima T. Moore. Of course, she's well known in the New York area and other places as a writer and director and actor and all that sort of stuff. So I found out about you through her, and then here we are today. She even guested in an episode of Brooklyn is in Love.
Yes, she was such a huge supporter, just like you, with the project and everything, and even with trying to promote it. Like we kind of met, the same scene in Manhattan, and especially the web series development was kind of just booming, and a lot of people were trying to get the work out there. And But it was such a treat to have her featured in that scene. And we were filming, in Brooklyn, and she was like, and she was actually doing music and a lot of stuff at that time and when we featured her. But she's, oh my gosh, she's so accomplished now. She's doing a lot of producing work and directing. And but yeah, I just wanted to, show my appreciation.
So as I said, this, Brooklyn is in Love was around, as I said, the 2011 time frame, and now we've come quite a ways since then. I mean, do you think that the methods of filmmaking have actually changed between, let's say, 2011 and today?
Oh, 100%. Yes. During that time when I was doing Brooklyn is in Love, it was basically, in terms of promoting your, projects, I would go out and especially the clubs and the places that I used to film, on the scene series, I would have like live performances with the artists and have like fundraiser events and try to promote so people can, discover it because, now you can, basically you can promote on Instagram, all these different things so people can be able to get discovered that way. But it was very limited, during that time. You had to be there, you had to see people in person and really promote yourself, and just the network. So now the new, younger generation, they have gone through COVID and that whole crisis and everything like that. So it's kind of, in a sense, now you don't really have to be, out there to promote yourself. But in terms of like online, the views and utilize that for marketing. But I still feel like, to me, it's always good to meet people in person and network because, you really build some really wonderful, genuine relationships, that way. And so I'm a little old fashioned, with that. So.
Oh, well, I mean, that's great. I mean, these days with, the people who might be in your project, who knows where they're going to be, where they're from, right? So you have to allow for things like the auditions from remotely and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, you will meet up if you are working on the same project. Just a matter of time and a matter of working it out where it's actually going to be done. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Let's see. So let's see. Okay. So let's talk about the main topic of today. We'll be going back to some other stuff with PL Entertainment later on, but let's start talking now about Mighty Voices. This is Mighty Voices, Trailblazers of LGBTQ Advocacy. So tell us basically what that project is about.
Yeah. So Mighty Voices pretty much came out, it was during the writer's strike for the Writers Guild of America East. I was working on another project called License Registration at that time. I was like, let's, do it. I was working with another writer that was helping with the edits and was getting the actors and everything together. And then all of a sudden, that happened, with actors out of work. It was kind of similar time when I first started with the Writers Guild. They were on strike at that time in 2010, 11, around that time. I think it was right after the strike. And then, so yeah, it's like a ripple effect, like all over again. And then through that, I was just in Florida at that time, just by chance, like I think it was over the holidays or, during the time that I was off from work. And I was seeing all these things happening in Florida, like, with the LGBTQ curriculum, them taking that away. A lot of teachers were having to move to like other places in New York, New Jersey, and I met a couple of them here, and they were telling me their stories and what they went through, especially families and the Black curriculum as well, that being taken away. And so I was like, yeah, I wanted to do something about it because especially for the past, I would say, since I've been teaching at Orange High School as a digital media and filmmaking teacher, I've, done a lot of advocacy work outside of, the high school and working with youth. And so I felt like, it was time to do something, like go back to my roots of documentary films and kind of shed light on this crisis, what's going on, and having their voices to be heard, the people that are going through it. So I just, me being kind of a nobody, like a snowbird, I don't know if they call it, just, somebody from New Jersey coming to Florida, part-time. And I just started developing it. I collaborated with Spencer Kelly, who was the first person that I reached out to about the project. And And then I reached out to another network, so on Happening Out TV. I was, looking at their news coverage of what's going on, especially within the community. And yeah, just like kind of added on. Christopher Clarkson Rule, he was another person that I contacted. He's in New York now. He just moved to New York. Hopefully Alan will be able to meet him. And also Elijah Manley, who's in Florida, that's in politics. He's another executive producer. And Dr. Nicholas from Atlanta, who helped, with the project, just being a listening ear and just, giving us advice. And so yeah, that's kind of how it's been so far with the project.
Oh, very good. That's a great introduction, and we will talk more about that in a second. First, I say hi to Randy Greenstein. She's watching us tonight.
How are you? And I definitely want to add, I'm sorry to interrupt, our fiscal sponsor, SunServe. They've been such an amazing resource with Mighty Voices too. So
we'll be talking more about SunServe and the fundraising efforts later as we go along. We're going to pause for a brief commercial, and we will be right back.
Awesome.
I'm Alan Greenstein, founder and producer at Support Our Hashtag Creatives. At Support Our Hashtag Creatives, I offer a number of services to support those developing a project. Check out the Services tab of my website at supportourcreatives.com. If you are interested, please use the Contact tab on my website or email me directly at alan@supportourcreatives.com. Okay, we are back. So now, how you ended up in Florida once again? How did what made it important for you to be in Florida?
Yeah, that's a great question. Florida, my family, especially my grandmother, she was living in Florida. She moved out there officially in the 80s. And right before she, passed away, or prior to that, I was always frequently going to Florida and visiting. I lived in Florida for a year during my high school. I think it was like my junior year. And then I had to go back for my senior year. So that was a, transition because you're visiting all your friends coming there. You don't know anyone. And so, but it was a great experience, nonetheless. And, but yeah, just kind of seeing that whole, just the differences, between, how New Jersey is and Florida and just, living in the South, but I think it's just, with what was happening with the election, a lot of things that have been happening, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement. So many things have been happening for the past 7 years, since then. And I just felt that it was time to do something about it, because so many people were talking about, Florida. It's like, we don't want to go there. That was like the last place for anybody to be. And then, but there's so many great people and organizations out in Florida that are not what, are part of that whole, demographic that, really wants to do a lot of damage, within the community. There's a lot of people that are trying to save lives. And so I just felt that it was time to like highlight them and so people can see, oh, wow, how could I be able to be assistance and support and be able to donate to these organizations. And so, yeah.
Well, that's very important what you said, because, those of us from the outside looking at Florida, we see something, a certain image. And what you're trying to do is break through and show a different side of the things that are going on in Florida. Yeah. And that's probably one reason why it's a great choice, because, the contrast between what people across the country are seeing and the messages you're going to be trying to present is with such a big contrast. So that's what I think. That's why it seems like Florida is a great place to be based upon the current climate.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's just, I felt like there's, Florida was like a lot of stories to be told in that area. And even the person I met with Faye, her stage name is Faye Watt. She's involved in a lot of different, LGBTQ organizations. She's, radio host, TV, host of Queer News Tonight, and out there, also an activist. And so, she was from New Jersey. She lived in, believe, Teaneck. She told me about, so for years, and then all of a sudden, by chance, she moved out to Florida, and she lives out there with her partner. And but hearing her story, how she ended up there, but she wants to stay there to be able to continue to do good and to support this demographic and the community. So I commend them, for that. So yeah.
Okay. Person I want to mention, by the way, Spencer Kelly. He was on my show a number of weeks ago. So if you go to Spotify and then go back a few episodes, you'll be able to hear about Mighty Voices from his perspective.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sorry for hopefully there's no background noises here. I just turned off my phone. But yeah, you can say it again, Alan, Spencer Kelly's involvement with the project or.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about fundraising. Okay. So what methods of fundraising have you used? I know that you've gone the fiscal sponsorship route as an example, but tell us about your how you've been raising your funds.
Yeah, basically, for this project, it was kind of a learning process. Always in filmmaking, always an ever-changing learning process with certain things. I started off doing, Brooklyn is Love on a zero type budget. Then, moving on to Lover's Game, where, excuse me, we've gotten investors and people, especially you, Alan, as a huge, in terms of executive producer on it. And and it was another stepping stone. And then also, with this project, I've learned that for documentary projects or even films in general, fiscal sponsors definitely help you with getting more donations or people in terms of a tax deductible donation. A lot of people that, contribute, they want to see where their money is going, which is totally understandable because I would be like that too. And especially if you have a fiscal sponsor, it kind of helps and, making tax deductible donation for tax time. And then, but also with that, you can get bigger donors and get other sponsors and people to contribute bigger, amounts. And then it helps with the whole overall budget of the production. But yeah, I noticed that a lot of projects that, are able to get that is social justice type, theme, so you ever see a lot of, films that come out about substance abuse or, related to any type of social issue. And you wonder how do, this movie just came out and this, that, and the other, they're actually, getting those bigger donations, because of that, and you're able to get the support, so I was like, okay, you know what? I think that we have something going on here, in terms of Mighty Voices that might be very appealing to them. And, these organizations and to be able to also highlight them within the doc is great. And so, yeah, it definitely, and it's a good thing because it shows, awareness about this issue, and I think with a lot of the projects that we've, even with Lover's Game and any others, we kind of shed light within that demographic and, for any type of thing. So, yeah.
Does SunServe deal with projects in Florida, or do they deal with projects everywhere?
So SunServe, pretty much it's in Florida based. They support, but in terms of this for Mighty Voices, we are going to be going to different states and doing that. But you always have to, for your fiscal sponsor, it has to be within that area that you film. That's what I've learned along the way. There's another wonderful organization called Our Fund. Fingers crossed, hopefully everything, we have to present, to them, but I've heard great things about Our Fund in terms of supporting projects like this within the community. And they do a lot, for LGBTQ organizations like PRISM and everything else. So, but yeah, again, there's kind of a restriction of it has to be within that area in Florida, but doesn't, close the door on if you wanted to get a fiscal sponsor in New Jersey and looking for an organization to support you. It just takes a lot of time to do a lot of research, and if you're willing to take that step and, taking your time and patience, that's what I've learned along the way. Excuse me, a lot of the organizations I reached out to over the summer, you didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden in the fall, it's okay, everybody woke up, they came back and you kind of just got responses. And, but yeah.
You're right. So, by the way, the website, mightyvoicesdoc.com. And from there, you can get over to SunServe and if you want to, contribute it all.
Yeah.
So, So this is, this is the website, you want to go to if for anything having to do with Mighty Voices. Okay. One thing we, let's see. What is the major goal of doing Mighty Voices? What are you trying to convey?
Yeah, I would just say that, the goal is just, spreading awareness, spreading unity, for everyone, and just knowing that, this crisis is related to, everything that we're kind of fighting for. It's equality. It's equality for LGBTQ communities, equality for the Black community, Asian, POC, BIPOC, things that are going on that are pretty much now, is happening everywhere. Before we had the conversation, I remember talking to the organization that I'm a part of, PRISM, and it was before the election. And I said, everything's going on. Everybody's talking about Florida. And I'm like, what happens if, it goes the other way with this election? Everything is going to be the same, in different areas. And now we're seeing it, we're seeing the things that are happening or going to be happening, related to that. And the most important thing, I think the message is, if everybody stands together, if you form a tribe and just, have a mission, things can happen, change can happen, and it takes time, it takes, and especially with this election, it's going to be another 4 years of, to see just what's going to happen. But it just takes time and organizing and just making sure, the communities that we live in, don't get affected, heavily. You just have to be standing together.
Mm-hmm. I guess you're hopeful, even despite the political climate, that Mighty Voices will make an important impact.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, despite everything, we've seen even though, it didn't go in our favor, but just seeing so many people, go out and support, even Kamala Harris, and out on the beat, men especially, out there and just, supporting this whole, sharing the same goal, speaks volumes that, if we kind of all stand together and work together, great things can happen, still, even though despite the chaos going on. Yeah.
By the way, I'd like to say hi to June Neguiso, filmmaker June Neguiso. He's almost always here for every episode. He's a filmmaker that I've been working with for a number of projects now. I executive produce his films, as well as my wife Randy and I. We are actually in front of the camera, right, doing acting roles. So he's really good at giving people chances and letting them have new opportunities.
That's great.
So thanks, June, for tuning in. Okay, so what is the basic structure of this documentary, and how did you come up with the people who are going to be speaking in the documentary?
So it kind of all happened with the Happening Out, television, the network. It's online. It's they also have an Apple. If you're on Apple TV, it's also on there. You can search for it. Queer News Tonight television. It's kind of like a CNN. They talk about all the stuff that's going on around the world. They have commentators, invite people, local folks, and it was kind of during the time because my father was kind of in and out of the hospital, as and I was kind of driving home late from work and everything, and I used to listen to it when I was in Florida. I just discovered it was like on either Facebook, or I don't think it was YouTube, but it came up on the news feed. And I love the commentary, I love the people, and I'm just hearing the stories of what's happening in Florida and just getting my news coverage from that. And so with me, I feel like, and I had a conversation with somebody recently, they were like, well, you should have like all these, big names of all the, in terms of Florida and stuff like that. Mm. And for some reason, that doesn't really appeal to me as a filmmaker. I like the people that are working on the ground and, helping as volunteers, and, that are not getting $100,000 a year or $200,000 a year. No, to me, people, just everyday people, finding the good fight, and supporting the bigger organizations and everything else out there. That I think appeals to me, and that's why I want to highlight them. And that's how I got connected with all the folks. It was, and also Christopher Rule, who was living in Florida at the time. He worked with Happening Out TV, Queer News Tonight. He was a producer on there, and so he worked with nonprofit organizations and things like that for almost like 20, 30 years. And so he told me, about certain subjects, like, you should pick this person, that person, or maybe I'll, introduce you to them. And some of the people actually, I already knew that, from him, and we're like, oh my God, that's the perfect pick. And we kind of both, had the same kind of mindset of who would be really appealing to this. And that's kind of how it came about. I kind of had interviews with them on Zoom. I met with them and talked to them, and just, discovered if they might be a good fit. And yeah, that's kind of how the whole, process went about in terms of, pre-production based on that.
Oh, okay. And let's see. So, where are you going to be actually filming? Is it going to all be in Florida?
All in Florida. We're looking to film Rep. Michelle Rayner, the politician within the community. Yeah, so that's, pretty much all the subjects are in Florida, Wilton Manors, Miami, area that we've been kind of doing coverage on. Because that's kind of like, where I've been, because of where my family lives in, Delray, beach area, Pompano, and, that's where, my property is over there. So I kind of use the areas that, not too far away. But there, a lot of these big organizations are there in those areas, Pompano and, Wilton Manors area. So, but I want to, my big goal is to, once season 1 is done, to, go to like New Jersey or, different states and highlight, really wonderful people that are part of the community that are doing a lot of good, politicians especially, and, LGBTQ advocates and teachers and, yeah, that sort of thing. So it's not the end. It's ever changing, ever growing, process, with this. But I think it's a great initiative to kind of highlight organizations that need our support.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I forgot to mention that this is planned to be a series.
Yeah. So, it started off kind of, we're like, oh, I was talking to Spencer. We were like kind of just, thinking about like, oh, should we do this as a full, feature film doc or a series? And to me, I thought it would be great to highlight it as a series because it gives everybody, all the subjects, a chance to kind of be highlighted in each episode. And it's kind of like, I was saying before, it's kind of me going back to my roots in a sense, of the doc and working on the scene series and sitting with the subjects and have the questions and everything. But this is like a bigger level with having like a big, crew, so it was like, I remember we filmed that weekend in October and just kind of, I had to take a second. It was like, oh my God, this is like, it's so surreal because, in the process and in terms of filmmaking, it used to be kind of me maybe working with the DP, for a day or two, and then me kind of filming for a day or two. And just because of funding and everything wise, so for our Lover's Game especially, so because it was very independent. But now, I love the fact that there's so many people attached to this project that share the same vision that I kind of started off with like a small seed idea. And really want this to grow and just are very passionate about it, especially our DP and the editor and Spencer, everyone. It makes me feel good, have that support. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as it being a series, so you mentioned that different episodes might be in different parts of the country.
Yes, definitely want to highlight, especially, different places, but I definitely want to, because there's so many other places, I'm pretty sure, like the South, that don't get highlighted, at all. So I'd love to continue, on different states and supporting organizations and highlighting them and see how long it goes, Hopefully it's not till like season 30, like how many years from now, but just seeing how, it goes from each state and just kind of like, seeing that happen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So, okay. So, see, let's talk about your parent organization, PL Entertainment. Tell us how you came to found it and what was your original goal when you founded it. What did you want to do by having an actual organization called PL Entertainment?
Yeah, so PL Entertainment started off because I was doing animation and visual effects like at the time, and the original logo was like a cartoon character that I created because PL Entertainment stands for PL Perfect Life Cartoon. So I did illustration, had my own comic strip, and it was about Maggie Scott. She ends up, in New York and moving out to California. That was her dream. It was my dream at the time, growing up as like a teenager and high school and everything. So later on, when I got older, I started getting it more, established and everything. But yeah, I just all of a sudden, went to get my LLC, did my own little research. It was a little bit after I graduated from college, I kind of just started being more serious about it. Started taking classes in New Jersey for starting your own business, and that's kind of how I, just started doing that way, and then collaborating with other artists, in New York. And I think it pretty much it happened, or in terms of getting more, collaborations and stuff with other filmmakers, started with Brooklyn is in Love. I think I would say during the first season, it was kind of just me. I had my huge camera. I rented from like DCTV. And then like along the way, the actors would be like, oh, I know this guy, or I've met this person, or like who's a DP. And then they heard about the project, and then it would start getting more crew members. But it was definitely, a work of art and an ever-changing like learning experience, along the way, for Brooklyn is in Love, because season 2 really, kind of raised the bar in terms of production value and everything. And, I was able to get a sound person and like, lighting person to help out, a PA, so that's kind of the whole process, went about with that.
Yeah. So Brooklyn is in Love had 2 seasons.
Yeah, 2 seasons. We had a good run. But I talked to Evan Baker, I think the last conversation I had with them, like, I would love to kind of bring it back,
Yeah.
And I know we're all like, older now. We're like, 40s, kind of bringing it back. And the funny thing is, like, when we were filming it, we're in our 20s and the characters were in their 30s, or like, around that age. So like late, so I was like, kind of ahead of the whole thing. But it would be great to bring it back. I have thought about it. I have talked to the co-writer as well, making it maybe in like a movie, type thing, and kind of changing it a little bit, making it more modern now. It's like 2024, kind of. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, that would be great. Once again, quite a number of years have gone by. See how everyone has changed.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. See, tell us about. Was it Lover's Game your first feature?
Yeah, Lover's Game was my first feature. After Brooklyn is in Love with the web series, I kind of just like took a leap of faith. I was like, yeah, let's make this film. I was living in the Bronx at the time. I think it was still taking classes. And I remember the person that was starring in Brooklyn is in Love. She was actually like we weren't like roommates, but she stayed with me for a period of time because I think she was going to getting another apartment or whatever. And I remember like writing the second, in terms of Lover's Game, actually. I was writing the development of it while I was there. There was like no furniture because it was my grandmother's house that we're like trying to like sell or whatever at the time. But I was like driving back and forth. I was like, let me just stay in the Bronx. I'm good, running water, that's fine. And so, and then I started writing. I had my laptop. I typed it up, in terms of the script, and I worked with my co-writer Stephanie, and we worked together. And then I talked to my actress about it, Miranda McCauley at the time, and I said, I developed this story. Look, what do you think? And then she actually recommended Crawford Collins, to be the co-star in it. She's like, because we're looking at people like, who could we, pick? And I remember sitting down with Crawford, telling her the whole project in Brooklyn at the same, coffee shop that we filmed for a lot of those, scenes. It's not there anymore, sadly. That big coffee shop in Brooklyn, Williamsburg. But yeah, and I told her about Lover's Game. I said, I'd love for you to be in it. And she's like, yeah, let's, get it going. And I did the SAG paperwork and got all that stuff together. And yeah, it was a long process, not a long process, but, I learned, through that experience. I learned heavily about sound. In terms of sound, it was like a long process with like getting a sound design, and all that stuff. But wonderful things happened. Getting another executive producer out in California, Jan, who very well. It lives in Oakland, California, that she became an executive producer on that project with you. And she was able to help with doing a screening out in California with like 300 people that showed up at that time. It was like in the beginning, and it showed that, that there was an interest, I guess, we had something going on, with this and we were able to get, some attention and getting highlighted. And but yeah, it was stressful at the times, because especially with the funding wise and having to use, my own personal funds, and Alan, you being an executive producer, helping out a lot. But it definitely helped me, gain more relationships and learn along the way. And I think it helped with the other projects for the Haunted Mind Insomniac. And yeah, I think it's yeah.
Yeah, I want to point out that Danielle and I have a really long-term relationship in terms of working on projects and being great friends too, of course. But
Yes.
Since around 2011,
Yes.
we're always working on projects, and we bounce ideas off of each other, and I as usually, I do what I can, working with Danielle to make her projects occur, just like that's what Support Our Hashtag Creatives does. But it's been really a real pleasure when you can develop a long-term relationship like this. That's really great, so because we worked on a lot of projects together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been such a great resource and a great friend. So I just want to say that I appreciate you.
Yeah. Let's see. So let's see. Can you tell us about LGBT love stories and your part in it?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So that came right after, Lover's Game. I met at, we talk about social media, like, I apologize, because you know what, me and Shelby met, like, I think it was on like a Facebook group or whatever, filmmaking group. And I was posting Lover's Game, the trailer, and doing interviews out there. And so she sent me a message on Facebook and was like, hey, I'm a filmmaker out in California. I'm working on this project. I'm looking for somebody to help with the L segment. And, would you be able to help? And I was like, okay. I'm like, she was like, yeah, I'll buy you, get you a plane ticket, fly you out to California. I just need you to write up, be the writer for the L segment and the director. I'll get you a crew. I'll get the actors. And so I was like, oh my God, it's my first opportunity to, to be working in California. So I did it. I packed up my bag and I headed out there, to California. It was like 2 weeks, and working with the production team. Wonderful to reconnect with Evan Baker. And he, she was looking for an actor at the time for her, segment for the movie. And Evan was able to, be a co-starring role with her and with her scenes. And but that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I always forever grateful for Shelby, because that collaboration project really opened doors. And, especially with her just giving people the freedom to just kind of, use their vision and their ideas or bounce ideas off each other and say, hey, how about this? Like, for this scene, like, yeah, sure. And like, and me working with her DP, just her own crew and everything, was a wonderful, experience. And happy to, announce that she's going to be actually working with us again, for Mighty Voices. And we had a good conversation last night, just like, kind of just talking about the old times. And I'm just so happy for her. Yeah. So I was talking, so the gang's all back. Gang's all here. So, but yeah, she's just, great person, and definitely want her to be highlighted for all her, accomplishments and just her vision. And I think she's a great, person to be addition, to the project. And but LGBTQ, Love Series, that was a wonderful, experience and stuff. So yeah.
So there's Shelby Chang, and along with Daniel Stone,
Yes.
also one of the actors in LGBT love stories. Once again, I've also interviewed them on this podcast. So once again, you go to Spotify, Support Our Hashtag Creatives, and scroll backwards. You'll get to see the interview with Shelby and Danielle. Yes. So there you go. See, I try to all the people on that I can.
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah. Let's see. One more is let's talk about the Haunted Mind of an Insomniac.
Yes. Yeah, so the Haunted Mind Insomniac, oh my God. So that came, I would say, after with Love Everything, we're in the mix of that. Haunted My Insomniac, I did write, but then I was kind of like, I had it on the shelf for a while because I didn't know when to kind of start the process. It was like, we're still filming Lover's Game and everything. But, it kind of came about because, even with the beginning stages of me, being a filmmaker, I loved Alfred Hitchcock. I loved, the 1950s, late 1950s, like film noir, Twilight Zone, all that type of stuff, and just like, I talked about before, I was a very strange kid. Usually all, the kids were watching all these different like stuff relevant. I used to, go home, and as a tween and watch like Gilligan's Island or, Welcome Back Kotter. Like I was watching older, shows, and I got my ideas that way, and so, but Alfred Hitchcock, it was a big thing. My mother was a very big fan of that as well. And so when I felt like it would be kind of cool to kind of add diversity to it, having a Black lead, play the role of Terrence, and the different characters and kind of like, having a different spin on it. And so, yeah, it actually, is basically about a writer that can't sleep, suffers from insomnia after his wife's death. She committed suicide at the rooftop of their apartment, and after the son's death, and so now he's like trying his best to finish this novel, to write and everything. And so so that's kind of the premises of I don't want to give too much away, but the premises of it, it's like a thriller type thing.
Yeah. See, you have all kinds of different subject matter and genres and stuff like that. It's really great. Well, I guess you learn a lot with each different project that you make, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna have another brief commercial break, and we'll be right back. I'm Alan Greenstein, founder and producer at Support Our Creatives. If you make something, albeit make a movie, start a business, write a book, make a physical product, run a nonprofit, promote people, are a songwriter, etc., you too are a creative, and I would love to have you be a guest on the Support Our Creatives podcast. If you want to be featured on this podcast, please use the contact tab on my website at supportourcreatives.com or email me directly at alan@supportourcreatives.com. Hey, we're back. So, tell me about the importance of being on panels, and to get your voice out there, because I always like to try to catch you whenever you're on some of your panels. I recently saw you in person in New York, on a panel. So tell us about the importance of getting your voice out there when you're on these panels.
Oh my God. So Alan, I just want to say, as growing up, basically growing up, I was like literally high school, I was voted most shy. Okay. So that shyness never goes away. And especially as I'm in adulthood, but, especially, with panels and everything like that, it's so great to kind of just, I feel like it's a community of everyone on the same page, just wanting to kind of learn from each other. And so and I'm learning from the other panelists that are on there as well, hearing their stories. But it's a great experience to, to kind of just talk and talk about any type of things like struggles that you might have faced along the way, and the people in the audience having those same struggles, and just kind of like trying to figure out, how to navigate that, and asking you questions and you bouncing ideas off of each other. That's what it's all about, as artists. And I definitely enjoy doing those panels.
Yeah, I know. I'm always encouraging Danielle to be on as many panels as she can, because she has such great knowledge to let people know about. So people are always going to learn something when Danielle is on a panel, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, what kind of future projects are you planning, briefly?
Okay. So I'd love to, go back to license registration. That was the project that I wanted to do, before, this came about. And then also Women in Bloom. That was another screenplay that I was writing about 3 women friends, and definitely want to, revisit that. I have been thinking about, possibly getting like books, published. I have like, children's books, and I've been talking to a couple of people, friends of mine that are in the Writers Guild
Oh,
as
wow.
well, and trying to see, how to navigate that. But yeah, just trying my best to, to just continue that whole, fight in terms of as an artist, and just getting my work out there and whatnot. So I kind of just see whatever opportunity comes, and a lot of times it's, just people kind of reach out and they're like, hey, Dion, you want to be a part of this project? And they send me like a script or whatever. And then, and I kind of just kind of navigate it. And I never, like I was just in my staff meeting and one of the persons, he was like, definitely learn how to say, no, and things like that. But it's very hard for me, to do that. I always try to make an opportunity to open door for any artist or filmmaker that's out there, because I know how it was when I was starting out, when people saying no and not wanting to, support you. And, I know how that feeling is, and never want them to have that either, and I want to provide any type of resource that I can give to any filmmaker out there. So, and I learned a lot of that from you, Alan. So I have a lot, for you to thank. So,
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's really great. So you have a little bit of advice to give people who want to get into the entertainment arena?
Yeah. Oh my God. So I would say, you know what? It's going to be hard a lot of times along the way. Like I said before, there might be people out there that don't share your vision. Might be people out there that don't want to support you or whatever. Or, just keep going. Just keep going. Form a plan. Put together a plan of how you want to produce your project, and build relationships. That's the most important thing. Try your best to support other artists. That's another thing too. And and say like, if they have a screening or film festival, that's the best thing to do. Just go out there, watch their movie, say, hey, oh my God, I really love that. Here's my card, and collaborate with them, because you never know what's going to happen, along the way, and even with the projects that I've worked on, along the way, or helping with them, even with J. Paul Murray and other people, other wonderful opportunities happen later, with Andrew that I've worked with, as he's the director working with Jay. Just by chance, I needed somebody to help me with the pitch video for Mighty Voices. And he was in New Jersey, and he's like, don't worry, Danielle, meet me at my apartment. I have my camera set up, and let's do it. I mean, that's just a wonderful thing, to have that people are close by and you just pick up the phone, and just by you showing their support for their projects, they're willing to do the same for you, So, yeah, definitely my advice would be to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Going to film festivals and award shows and screenings. I do that a lot, and it's a great way to network. That's the best thing to do. Yep. Yeah. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Oh my God. So if you go on Instagram, DE227, that's the handle. And then also Facebook, I have, you can definitely search for me and it should pop up with my name. If you go to, we also have a Facebook page for PL Entertainment Films. You can find us there. Also on Instagram, same name, PL Entertainment Films. And our website, www.plentertainment.com, and you will find more information about the company and projects coming up ahead.
Fantastic. And also Mighty Voices, mightyvoices.com.
Yes.
So there you go.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Danielle, thanks so much for being on tonight. And it was great once again. You have such great knowledge to impart to people. So I'm sure they've learned a lot. And I just want to remind people that in case people who couldn't catch the live, this episode will be repurposed and placed on Spotify and all your other favorite streaming platforms, where you can find all my previous episodes. So, so it's important that people get to see it, even if you can't see it live. Okay. So with that, I'm going to say, good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Here's a message about Crystal Starnes, advocate for victims, and podcaster.
Are you an entrepreneur, actor, music artist, or someone trying to make a difference in the community, or have a story that could help someone suffering in silence? If your answer is yes, then you need to check out Crystal Starnes' various podcast shows that she produces and hosts. Come on one of her shows and make a difference. Promote your business on her platforms. Ask her about package deals to get your brand more noticed. Want a commercial about your business done by her voice? She also offers package deals for that service. You can find her at crystalstarnshow.com and voiceforvictimsradio.com. Also, if you want access to all her podcast shows and blogs, join her community awareness page for just $4.99 a month. That's right, just $4.99 a month. Then you would have access at a click of a button to her various platforms. Crystal Starnes is trying to make a difference for all people in the world. She wants to help as many people as she can so no one is suffering in silence. Anyone who has a vision and wants to achieve their dream, she has the passion to help promote you to get you to the next level of success.
Episode credits. Main interview portion, originally live streamed and recorded by StreamYard, was repurposed by Alan Greenstein. Support our hashtag creatives. Animated and static logos were created by Shakisha Williams. Episode thumbnail static promo image was created by Alan Greenstein, using Canva. Episode intro and outro were written by Alan Greenstein. Episode intro and outro voices were created by text-to-speech technology, using Balabolka. Episode was edited and packaged by Alan Greenstein, using Camtasia and Spotify for Creators. Thank you for spending time with us. Please tune into our subsequent shows as well as our previous shows.